Okay, try to wrap your head around this. You're being deported from the United States. You're told you're going back to your home country, Somalia. But when the plane lands, you're in Kenya. This isn't some hypothetical scenario. It's really happening, and we're going to break down how.
At first, it sounds like a massive logistical screw-up, right? But the real answer is a whole lot more complicated. It's this tangled web of politics, old paperwork, and deep, deep history. So how on earth does this happen? Let's put a number on it. 71. That's how many people were on a recent deportation flight from the US that landed at Kenya's main airport. But get this, 64 of them were Somali nationals. They were supposed to be going home to Somalia, but instead, they found themselves completely stranded, a whole country away.
All right, to unravel this mystery, we have to start in the United States. We need to look at the political climate that really set the wheels in motion for all of this. Well, this quote from Donald Trump really paints a picture of the mood behind the immigration policies of his administration. There was a major push to ramp up deportations, and a lot of that focus was aimed squarely at specific communities. This really set the stage for everything that came next.
And one of the communities that found itself in the crosshairs was the Somali community in Minnesota, which is one of the largest in the entire country. You have to remember, many of these folks originally came to the U.S. as refugees, escaping a brutal civil war. But under these new, stricter immigration policies, if you didn't have full citizenship, you suddenly became a target for deportation, even if you'd lived in the States for years.
So that explains the push from the US side, but it doesn't explain the destination. Why Kenya? To figure that out, we have to follow the paper trail, and that's where we find the Kenyan connection.
You see, the answer isn't really about where these people are from originally. It's all about their journey. For so many Somali refugees, getting to the US wasn't as simple as hopping on a plane in Mogadishu. No, it was a long, difficult process. A process that left behind a crucial trail of documents.
And here's the bureaucratic trap. So many Somalis first escaped the war by crossing the border into Kenya. They ended up in massive refugee camps like Dadaab, and it was there that they were processed and given travel documents, often by the UN or by Kenyan authorities. So years later, when they were resettled in the US, their official entry paperwork, the documents the US government looks at, says they came from Kenya, not Somalia.
And that right there, that's the absolute key to this whole thing. For US immigration, paperwork is everything. If the documents say you came from Kenya, then as far as they're concerned, Kenya is your legal destination for deportation. It doesn't matter where you were actually born. It's like a bureaucratic default setting, but one with absolutely massive consequences for real people.
But you know, the story of Somalis in Kenya is so much deeper than just some refugee camp paperwork. To really get what's going on, you have to look back at a really long and often very tense shared history.
There's this one quote from a commentator that really sticks with you. Every Somali is a Kenyan Somali. It points to this idea that for many people, the line between these two identities is incredibly blurry and has been for a long, long time.
I mean, the Somali presence in Kenya isn't new at all. We're talking about back in the early 1900s when they were helping build huge projects like the Kenya-Uganda Railway. But after Kenya got its independence, things got very difficult. The Shifta War led to years of marginalization. It really wasn't until the 1990s that some of those discriminatory laws started to get rolled back. But the memory of that conflict, it still lingers.
And if you want to find the original source of all this, you have to go all the way back to the colonial scramble for Africa. European powers just carved up the continent, drawing lines on a map that made no sense for the people who actually lived there. And in the process, they split the Somali people across 5 brand new countries, which is why today there are huge ethnic Somali populations in places like Kenya and Ethiopia.
So when you mix this aggressive US policy with all this complex regional history, you don't just get a bureaucratic issue. What you get is a web of geopolitical tension that stretches all the way across the globe.
And this question from a Ghanaian commentator really sums up the frustration that's being felt in other parts of Africa. People are watching this happen and asking, wait a minute, why are we expected to deal with a problem that started with a US policy? There's this growing anger that Kenya is being treated like a dumping ground.
And this just goes to show you how connected everything is. U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is herself from a Somali background, allegedly made some comments about historical Somali lands in Kenya and Ethiopia, and it just set off a firestorm online. It's a perfect example of how U.S. domestic politics can spill over and cause real immediate friction in East Africa.
You know, we've been talking about policy and paperwork and geopolitics, but it's so important to remember what's really at the heart of this story, and that's the human beings who are caught right in the middle of it all.
Because what's happening here isn't really just deportation, it's displacement. Deportation is supposed to mean sending someone back to their home.
Displacement is when you're forcibly moved to a third place, a country where you might have no legal status, no family, and really, no future.
The human cost here is just immense. Families are being ripped apart. People are literally being dropped in a country that isn't theirs, with no support system waiting for them. And on the other side, Kenya is now facing a brand new humanitarian crisis and a diplomatic headache that it never asked for.
So all of this leaves us with one final, very big question. When one country's policy ends up creating a crisis for another country, who is actually responsible for the people, the human lives that get caught in the gears of it all?